Welcome everyone. I'm Megha Rastogi, Product Manager at Okta, and with me I have Sandeep Kumbad, our Field CTO. And today we'll be talking to you about preventing identity-based phishing attacks using phishing-resistant authenticators and passwordless. Now let's look at the agenda. I'll be starting off talking about phishing attacks, the why, what, and how of these attacks, and then Sandeep will dig deeper into how Okta can help here and prevent phishing attacks. And then I'll come back and talk about investments and our key takeaways. So let's get started with our why, what, and how. So as you can see here, phishing has been on the rise for a while. But what's unique here is that we have actually seen more than 60% increase in phishing attacks from last year. And as you see on the graph on the right, it's been a very steady increase. And that rise has also shown that more than 1 million total phishing attacks in just the first quarter of this year. So now this can lead to account takeovers and data theft. What that means is it's a cost to your employees as well as businesses. So a problem definitely worth tackling. Now let's look at the different phishing attack vectors here. Most of the ones you hear about are the identity-based attacks. So this is where the threat actor is trying to trick the user in getting hold of credentials and get to their identity. So the basic ones are like credential stuffing, email phishing, SMS phishing, but now it even gets more advanced where you can have MFA push fatigue attacks or man-in-the-middle attacks. And this is where Okta can actually help prevent phishing attacks through Okta's phishing-resistant authenticators and access policies. But now, even if your identity is secure, there could be endpoint attacks. Your device could have a malware. Your network could be hijacked. And Okta can help minimize that phishing surface through our third-party integration, device signals, and adaptive MFA policies. Now, I'll take you through a series of these different phishing attacks, and we'll see how phishing-resistant authenticators can help stop these attacks. So in our first scenario here, you see that there's a phishing attack where the user doesn't have any MFA at all. So it's a basic credential theft. The threat actor sends a malicious link to the target user. The target user enters their credentials to this static phishing page, and they're not actually logging into the legit web app, but to a phishing page. But in that time period, threat actor has captured the credentials. They can use those credentials to authenticate as the target user. The user did not have an MFA, but if they had any level of MFA, it would have still added some level of friction for the threat actor. However, if they had a traditional MFA, there are lots of ways now to actually get phishing kits online. The most famous ones being EvilGenX, where you can actually do a MFA bypass. So in this scenario, you see in this diagram on the top center, there's the adversary in the middle phishing page, which actually works as a proxy between the target user and the legit web app. So in this scenario, when the target user clicks on that malicious link, they enter the credentials and then they ask for an MFA. Now, this traditional MFA could be your OTP or your push. They click on that. They are taken to the phishing page and proxied into the legit web app. Now, in this time period, the threat actor has captured the credentials, but also the session cookie. And they can use that session cookie to single sign on into the target account. Now, this attack could have actually been stopped if the target user was using a phishing-resistant authenticator instead of a traditional MFA. So let's look at how that would have played out. Now, in this example, let's say that the target user is using a phishing-resistant MFA, like a Touch ID, which is a FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator. They enroll into Touch ID to the legit.com website. So they have enrolled into legit.com. The credentials are cryptographically signed and they tie to legit.com. So now in this case, when the user clicks on that malicious link, phishing.com, they are taken to that page, but when they try to log in through Touch ID, they actually get an error and they're not able to proceed further. Now, this is because we know that phishing-resistant authenticators are origin bound. So those credentials were actually bound to legit.com and not phishing.com. So the threat actor does not get any of the credentials or the session cookie and is not able to authenticate. So this is the power of phishing-resistant authenticators. And how did that actually works. So there are three major properties for phishing resistant authenticators. The first one being no shared secrets. So no passwords, no OTPs, but instead a credential key pair, which is cryptographically signed, and the private key is actually stored on the device, on the hardware security module. And this could be the TPM, the secure enclave, but it's on the device. The second part being origin bound. A credential key pair is tied to a specific domain. So in the example we had seen earlier, when the user had enrolled their authenticator, it got tied to legit.com and not phishing.com. So when they go to phishing.com, that would give them an error. The third part being trusted. When you enroll in an authenticator and verify with that authenticator, you get an attestation. Now, this attestation helps verify the public keys from a trusted authenticator. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Sandeep to talk about how Okta can help here.
Thank you, Megha. Now that you all know that as how many ways attackers can phish you, let's see how can Okta help. Okta does not rely on phishing-resistant authenticators alone to mitigate phishing attacks. Instead, Okta deploys the defense in depth principle to combine phishing-resistant authenticators with adaptive sign-on policy, which evaluates contextual device signals from your MDMs, from your EDRs, XDRs, your location signals from IPs and geolocation, your risk and behavior signals from machine learning, as well as unmanaged device assurance signals, which Okta Verify FastPass can pass it over to Okta to analyze. I would also want to bring your focus towards the fourth line of defense advised over here, which is observability, where Okta's security workflows, along with the logging and auditing features Okta offers, can really enhance your remediation efforts based on security events. Now, admins can also erode the value of a stolen cookie to an attacker using sign on policies, which Okta offers at the global as well as the application sign on level. In OIE, you can create application sign on policies for the first party as well as the third party apps. If they require phishing resistant authenticators, that greatly diminishes the visibility for the attacker. Creating policies that require step up to phishing resistant factors or that limit the use of managed devices is also a way of limiting the blast radius for the attack. So too is limiting the duration of a session according to the sensitivity of the resource, if it's a privileged resource or a financially significant resource. You should also create session policies and authentication policies that limit access to applications by locations, filtering it by IPs, ASPs, ASNs, or the IP type. These rules can be applied from an anonymizing proxies perspective as well, and could be applied pre-authentication before the user enters credentials, such that adversaries simply won't see your login page altogether. On the subject of network zones, if your risk and exposure to phishing is elevated, traditional controls like web filtering and can also play a significant role in restricting outbound traffic from managed endpoints to untrusted websites. Next step in the app sign-on policy design is choosing the right authenticator you want the user to use. Here on the left, you see the admin setting up a phishing resistant authenticator policy by merely checking the phishing resistant checkbox. And Okta chooses the two authenticators available in this particular case, which is FIDO2 WebAuthn and Okta Verify. And those could be presented to the end user at the time of the application access. On the right, you see the end user view. They are presented with both of the phishing resistant authenticators, FastPass, and the FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticators. So Okta supports a variety of authenticators, including FIDO2 Authenticator, to protect from real-time credential phishing from an identity attack perspective across different platforms, be it iOS, Mac OS, Windows, or Android. Choosing the right authenticator depends on your deployment needs. For example, if in a federal setting, if you already have the PIV card issued to your users, you should be able to use that as the phishing resistant authenticator. But it has limited mobility support or mobile support. So in those cases, you may want to club it along with a FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator as an additional or a backup authenticator option. For most deployments, Okta FastPass on OIE would be a great alternative for best user experience and security along with the device and location context. If being hardware protected and authenticator bound is not critical to your application access, passkeys may also be able to offer a great user experience balanced with a roaming credential authenticator so your employees and business partners can make use of. As I mentioned before, the observability layer of defense will really take your phishing resistant preparedness to the next level. As you know, phishing aims to take over a user's account. So here I have the most common scenario of an account takeover scenario, which models exactly how Okta workflows would be able to prevent those kind of phishing attacks. And in this particular example, I'm highlighting the use case where a user calls the help desk to get their factor reset, and the help desk could do something malicious, or the end user may be choosing to be a user, but they are not the user themselves. So in this particular example, the event for the factor reset triggers an Okta workflow, which puts the user into a monitoring table group within workflows. And this monitoring table group could be temporary. We can keep it for the chosen business time period, could be 24 hours. And within those 24 hours, if the user attempts to, let's say, reset the user's password or even try to reset other factors, that would trigger a SecOps alert that can automatically be clearing user sessions by triggering another workflow in that remediation workflow process, and also reset the previously reset or enrolled factor during the account takeover attempt altogether. So this gives you an example of how account takeovers can be prevented, even if the attacker manages to get inside by trying various different authenticator choices, or even choosing a non-identity based attack, which could be stealing the device altogether. Here, I would want to show you a demo where we're going to set some phishing resistant authenticator policies on Okta dashboard. Here, I'm going to choose and edit a sign-on policy and add a business partner's phishing resistant sign-on policy. So I'm going to select the users group to be business partners. I'm going to select the device to be registered, which means Okta Verify FastPass is installed. And then I'll let the device assurance and network policies be as is. And then after successful authentication, I'm going to choose a possession factor, which is phishing resistant, and that happens to be Okta Verify and FIDO to WebAuthn in this case. Now, having done that, I'm now going to create a new user. I'm going to choose a basic business partner user, choose a username, put them into the same group for which we designed the policy. And once the user is staged, I'm going to activate them. The thing which you will notice over here, I did not set a password or did not ask the user to set a password. This will be a passwordless business partner user creation. The business partner gets this email. They will activate their Okta account. And with the use of an email magic link, which is passwordless, they will be able to activate their account and are now ready to set up a FIDO2 authenticator. In this case, the user is setting up the FIDO2 authenticator on a Safari browser. And once they do set it up, they are into the business application. Now, in this case, we just set up one of the authenticators, the other optional one, which we did not. But let's review as an end user the notification that the factor was enrolled. So the end user will continue to get these notifications if someone else tries to register another factor for them. In this case, now I'm going to register Okta Verify FastPass, which is phishing resistant as well. I'm going to add this account into FastPass. Here, the identity needs to be verified before FastPass enrolls the user. So I'm going to verify the user's identity using the previously enrolled FIDO2 authenticator. Once it's verified, FastPass tries to enable the Touch ID experience on this macOS device. And once the Touch ID has been verified, the identity has been verified, and that the user is enrolled into FastPass as well as this factor onto the user's profile. Let's go back and check if the factor enrollment notification has showed up. We see that over here. And user also gets an option to report suspicious activity if just in case if the user did not register this particular factor. And once the user triggers this suspicious activity, a workflow can be triggered on the backend to clear off the user sessions and the factor registered. Now, in this case, I register both the factors on app.showokta.com domain. Here, I'm going to choose the default domain, which is, again, another origin from a phishing resistance perspective, and would try to authenticate the same user using one of our phishing resistant factors. And what you're going to notice over here, when browser challenges to prompt for the FIDO2 authenticator, the browser is not able to recognize that the origin is bound with this particular credential over here. So the authentication process fails, which verifies that the phishing resistance isn't works. And here is a great customer success story with Figma, who chose to go completely deploy phishing resistant factors in the form of YubiKeys. So in this example, they shipped YubiKeys to their employees' chosen addresses, and that happened to be their FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator bootstrapping the user's activation altogether. They also clubbed it along with the risk-based authentication policies, which we highly advise to go along with the authenticators itself. And from an observability standpoint, they deployed threat insights as well as piped all of their authentication logs over to their SIEM system for real-time transaction monitoring and the access event monitoring. Along with that, they also had application accesses along, on their Android devices where G Suite was not able to trigger the FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator. So they chose Okta Verify from an authentication standpoint directly into those applications. And with Okta Verify, the one ability which you can deploy is to trigger for number challenge for high risk login attempts. And this could be preventing your MFA fatigue scenarios where the user does go and trigger a lot of these MFA authentications. User will see a challenge on their Okta Verify um, application, and they have to accept the number challenge on both the screen as well as the mobile device to assert and confirm the Okta Verify push. And then the user would be able to log in. So that will prevent your MFA fatigue attempts and attacks, and as well as give you the privileged access protected by the FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticators. So great success story with Figma over here. Now we are enhancing and taking the identity bootstrapping with Passwordless to the next level. We are going to be tightly partnering with Yubico to have an allowed devices list for YubiKeys. With that, we can enroll a particular YubiKey for a particular user before sending it over to them, so that the user who has chosen to be using that FIDO2 WebAuthn key would be able to enroll, and nobody else would be able to make use of that key, and the user themselves will not be able to enroll any other key out there. So this tightly couples the power of FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator and the enrollment policies to couple it and bound it with the user's onboarding scenario. With that, let's see what do we have in store from a roadmap perspective on FIDO2 as well as the phishing resistant authenticators. Over to you, Megha.
Thank you, Sandeep. So let's talk about the way forward and the investments we are making. So three key themes. The first one, as you know, we already have a broad range of phishing-resistant authenticators, but we continue to enhance on them. So our FIDO2 WebAuthn authenticator, we're adding more tighter enrollment controls so admins can specify through an allow list which authenticators are allowed in their org or not. The second one is around passkey management. We know that passkeys are evolving and they may not necessarily be hardware protected or device bound. And for those sensitive organizations that need this protection, we have enabled blocking passkeys at an org level. And we continue to enhance that towards a group level. The third one is our flagship Okta FastPass, which is already phishing resistant, but we are going to continue to make enhancements in there as well. And to learn more about that, there's another session happening, so please log on to that as well. And our fourth one is our PIV CAC smart card, which today works as an IDP, but we're enhancing it so it can actually work as an authenticator and can be applied in the app sign-on policies. So this is great for some of the federal use cases where you want to allow restrictions through PIV on sensitive apps. Our second key theme is around enhancing passwordless onboarding and phishing-resistant enrollment. So Sandeep in his previous slide talked a little bit about it, that today we do actually allow pre-enrollment of security keys. As an admin, you can pre-enroll a YubiKey and send that to the user. This ensures that the user can only use that YubiKey. And tightening with that and the allow list, we can specify which authenticators are allowed even for self-enrollment. We plan to continue this forward with partnership with Yubico on their enterprise delivery and onboarding. Now, the third thing is around enhancing sign-on policy controls for phishing-resistant authenticators. Today, we already have certain controls around specifying if authenticators should be phishing-resistant, hardware protected, but we plan to add a few more that can help control what kind of authenticators would be allowed in the sign-on policies. Now, with that, let's talk about our key takeaways. The first one being go passwordless. So no secrets, no OTPs, and adopt phishing-resistant authenticators wherever possible. The second one is around setting contextual policies, and within those, leveraging device signals, behavior, and network signals. And the third one being enforcing observability and monitoring and deploying security orchestration with products like Okta Workflow. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining our session. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the chat. Thank you.